Hey there, good people. It's Shauna Johnson, and this is World War III Ideologies. If you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know that I have been screaming from the rooftops, so to speak, that we are currently in World War III, and that just because it's not a hot war doesn't mean that it's not an active war. So I don't think it's fair to call it a Cold War either, because it's hot in some sectors of our economy, in some sectors of the world. There are battlegrounds. You look at Ukraine. So to say that World War III isn't hot or isn't active, I think is incorrect. And so I have been trying to reach out to as many people to let them know what it is that I have seen. If you don't know, I am a stay-at-home mom, and I have been for about 10 years. COVID extended my time at home. And I have a thirst for knowledge. I truly do. And I have to understand things. So back in 2017, when I really needed to understand what the hell was going on, how Donald Trump ended up in the White House, I did a lot of research, and I honestly just have not stopped. And because I had all that time on my hands, maybe breastfeeding in the middle of the night or whatever, I had this unique opportunity to really dive in and understand what was going on in a way that most people don't have time for. They have a regular 9-to-5 job. I mean, even the journalists honestly don't have time to put this all together when they're trying to pump out article after article after article. But in my case, I had the time to do the research. I had the time to learn. And honestly, I have the time to throw this out into the world. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm going to just, give my knowledge to you. This is all free. If you want to sponsor me or pledge or whatever, I am on Patreon under Shauna Johnson, and I am on YouTube. You might even be listening. Honestly, I don't know all that much about this podcast thing. This is my first one. So you can also find me on YouTube as well at World War III Ideologies with Shauna Johnson. So with that, let me just kind of go on, with the introduction that I have about what this channel is going to be about, what this podcast is going to be about. And honestly, for the time being, it's going to be very sporadic. This is a different platform for me, but I think I'm going to love it, because we all know that I love to talk and I love to hand over knowledge to people and teach people. And let's be honest, I like to hear myself speak. So without further ado, let me talk about World War III's ideologies. And you can find this article that this is based on in the pinned post at Patreon. I like the Patreon because you can see the written form of all this and read it if that is your preference. So again, without further ado, let's get into it. So traditionally, war has been considered either hot or cold based on whether the countries have started fighting each other with actual weapons, bombs, all that stuff, right? And traditionally, after an army of the opposing country or the kingdom, whoever's attacking another kingdom, not in defense, but in offense. So if one kingdom attacked another kingdom and then they actually won, they then moved their citizenship, their citizenry, I guess I should say, to that other country. And when they did that, it kind of allowed to make a quick culture change in that area, right? They got rid of everybody that they could or wanted to that lived in the kingdom before they took it over, and then they bring in all of their people. And now their kingdom is thus bigger, and they're not going to have people fighting against them trying to get their kingdom, land, country back. But we have entered a very different time with a high probability of this ruler change or this kingdom takeover, where you actually see people move into the country. We're not seeing that happen anymore. That doesn't happen. We don't see them move in to the invaded country. We don't even really see people, wipe out a population in order to then move to the country. It's just it's a very different time. So knowing that, isn't it probable, not just possible, but probable that the rules have changed, and that's why a hot war no longer requires that countries are throwing bombs at each other, but rather that they attack in more meaningful ways. I mean, either way, the goal is the same, and that goal is a culture change. Whether the kingdom goes in and throws everybody out, banishes all the people that were in the land or country that they conquered, whether they throw them out and bring their people in to change the culture, or whether they can just change the, quote, hearts and minds of the people, right? You've heard that before. That's the same thing as saying, winning over the hearts and minds is political speak for a culture change. So it is with this in mind that I have been just shouting about this, that we are currently at war against the Marxists. And here's the thing, Marxists can be communists or they can be fascist, just as the pre-West was at the start of World War II. Marxism, it sounds very altruistic, but no matter what happens, the end result is the same. The loss of freedom. That's what the end result is. The individual loses freedom for the good of the country and the people of that country. But the problem is, the challenge is, it's not even a challenge because it can't be overcome. It's honestly just a problem because it's human nature. We are not all the same. And because we are not all the same person, I like to do this kind of stuff, make podcasts or what have you. Somebody else might like to do something else. And so I'm going to want fun technology that I can play with for this particular thing, where somebody else is going to say, well, I don't find that as important. And you know what? We really need a chair. So instead of having this iPhone and this ability to make a podcast and, whatnot, we're just going to have stuff to make chairs because chairs are more necessary, and everybody in our society absolutely needs a chair. So the challenge then is that, or the problem is that there's not one society in which every single person wants the same things. And just because you say, oh, well, we can give everybody a chair, if we just make chairs for everybody, people aren't going to be happy with that either. It sounds like, very altruistic, but that's just not how human nature works. Some person's going to say, you know what? I made like 5 chairs already, and that person has only made 1 chair. Why do I have to make more chairs than that other person when all I want to do is go on the podcast? Why can't I just make 1 chair like that person does and leave and go do what I want to do? But again, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. The country, when it's Marxist, the country needs the people of that country, the citizenry, to do what is needed for the good of the people. And that's why it takes your individual freedom away while, making it sound like you're giving some kind of freedom to society when you're really not. You're limiting society. And Marxists can be either communist or they can be fascist. And then I think communists are fascist too, I guess maybe it's communism and autocrats. In all honesty, I am not brilliant when it comes to vocabulary. That is not my thing. I would give myself a C- for vocabulary, in all honesty. But the vocabulary doesn't matter. What matters is that we understand what the end result is, right? What's the point? What are we underlining here? So what matters then is that a communist society says, okay, we want a stateless society. Okay, well, great. Well, how is this stateless society that, how is this stateless society going to be able to make sure that everybody has what they need? Like, Who's going to make sure that that person only has one chair per person in their family until everybody has a chair? And then who decides who gets the next chair once everybody's been fulfilled, right? Like, who decides that? And, if you decide, okay, well, we need a leader. Okay, well, great. Well, who's going to choose the leader then? Like, how does that work? Are you just going to pick the people that, okay, you know what? In our communist society, these people are probably the best suited, the bankers. They know how to, run the money. They know how to invest in things. They understand costs. They understand P&Ls. Like, we'll go with them. Or, you know what? The contractors understand how to build things. And let's face it, the most important thing is that we have shelter, transportation, all of that stuff. So then they should be in charge. I mean, how do you decide that? Does it become, just a popular, like, what happens? So then now you have created a state, if you will. And once you create a state, communism is over. It's over. And now the people are at the will of the people that they've chosen for the state. Like, what rules are you going to have? Are you going to say, okay, well, you only get to be president for 4 years? Well, what, come on, it's not that much. It's very different from what we have in the United States, but, communism just doesn't work. You can't have it. It doesn't make sense. And then on the other hand, you can have, the socialism where we give away our freedom to the state to, quote, preserve our traditions and morals. And we give our freedom away to just a select few based on their abilities to succeed during the capitalist stage of socialism. Now, I'm going to go more into that, but if you don't know, capitalism is communism in its infancy is what the Chinese believe, but we're going to go into that later. Anyway, what the National Socialists did, or they call themselves now, the National Conservatives, what they're saying is that someone needs to select a government that is going to make sure that the traditions and the morals of Americans are, returned to the United States back when we were great, right? Or some BS. Well, if you didn't know, that's exactly what Hitler said was the definition of socialism when he said the National Socialism. That's what he said. He said these, people from out of Germany, these non-Protestant Germans, are changing the tradition and culture of the Germans, and we have to change that. We have to change that. Even when he took over France, he even said that you couldn't be a first-generation French person. If you were, you had to go back to your country of origin, where your parents were born. So this is just what he believed. The same thing kind of happened to in Iran at the fall of Iran. They were free. They had a democracy. There was a lot of freedom. They could make their own choices. And then someone said, you know what? Not everybody has enough. We're not sharing, whatever excuse they used, right? Or we know everything, so we're going to become the state, and we're going to make the choices as to what our morals and traditions are. And so that's what they did. And they instituted the morality police. Thing is who decides what's moral and immoral? And where does that stop? And so what happened is, people would be in favor of the morality police. And then a couple years later, when they got even more strict, then you would see people that were in favor of the morality police getting arrested by the morality police. So obviously, that's not working very well either. And we're going to talk in this particular podcast, we're going to talk more about the perceived pros and the horrific cons of the various systems of government. I also want to point out that socialism, by definition, requires that one be a nationalist. Socialism only works if a country doesn't need to fulfill the needs of a minority group. That costs extra money. If a country needs to fulfill the needs of everyone, they must do this in the most economical and efficient way possible. That only makes sense, right? So when you make millions of products for hair, that's fine, like mine, that's more of a European hair, if you will. When you are making millions of hairbrushes for that segment of society that makes up 99%, let's say, of the population, and then all of a sudden a minority group walks in and their hair is very different and requires a different brush, and now you're only going to make like 10 brushes. Well, obviously, those 10 brushes are going to cost more per product than the ones that were made in bulk. And so in order to be a socialist, whether you're on the communist side of socialism or you're on the Nat C side of socialism, either way, if you're just a nationalist or a communist, you have to have nationalism. So when people say to me that they're communists, especially when they're on the left and they're so anti-racist and all of that, I'm like, friends, you have no idea. You have no idea. And the thing is that I think that they don't understand it, because when you think of nationalists, it doesn't sound as bad as it should. It's like, oh, I'm proud of my country, so they can sell it that way. Oh, I'm a nationalist, America first. It sounds enticing, right? That's how you bring people into the con. You know what I mean? Get them on your side, manipulate them, sell them. I think that the better word that we should use for nationalist is a segregationist. That's what they are. They're segregationists. And so they're segregationists, and they're either going to be in favor of a stateless society none of it just doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. It can't be successful. And so it is because that I am so greatly opposed to segregating our country and the world that, in all honesty, I feel like I have to be the journalist that I wish we had in this moment, who could see all of this and who had a bigger voice than I did, and one that reached way farther than mine does. But you know what? This is what I got, and I got to work with what I got. I've got my own voice, and fortunately for me, I've got a lot of supporters, and I really appreciate you all. So I hope that you will continue following me. I hope you'll subscribe, do all that fun stuff. I have a feeling that I'm going to be making a lot of these podcasts. You're going to get a lot of content out of me. Like I said, I like to talk, but I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this and hopefully learn something. But more importantly, I really hope you share this information with other people, not necessarily the post or the podcast, but just, share this information to your friends from your own heart. Because when they see how much you believe it, and you're not just regurgitating a talking point that they've already heard, I think you'll have a chance at getting those people who are on the fence to vote in favor of freedom and not segregation. Thanks so much. Till next time.